From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's America. I'm freshman congressman from Missouri, Mark Alford, and I believe in America. I believe in you, and most importantly, I believe that our greatest days are still ahead. You know, each week we take you behind the scenes to share the stories, the news, the legislation happening right here in D.C., and to meet the wonderful people I have the honor of working with each and every day I'm here, shaping our great nation. Well, today our guest is Majority Whip Tom Emmer. Whip Emmer grew up in Minnesota. He studied political science at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, earned his JD from William Mitchell College of Law. He practiced law at his firm while balancing family, coaching hockey, serving on city councils in Independence and Delano. He served in the Minnesota House of Reps from 2004 to 2008 and was sworn into Congress for his first time in 2015. Right now he is serving his fifth term. In his position, he aids in the House Republican policy platform, rallies support for our legislation and policy priorities. Just so much to talk about today. Please welcome Majority Whip Tom Emmer. Whip, good to see you.
Great to be with you, Mark, and great to serve with you. It's a real honor.
Well, thank you. We are in your office, and I know we're on radio right now, or podcasts, and it's a nice office, and you've got a great view. I'm looking at the Supreme Court of the United States right now.
Yeah.
Did you ever think you would be sitting in this office?
No, I never thought I'd be in Washington. This, I'm told, is the nicest office in the Capitol. And for a guy who ran a law practice for 20 years, basically out of the trunk of my car in 3 different states, to have an office like this, number one, I never would have expected an office like this. And two, no, I never expected to be in Washington, D.C.
What did you want to do growing up?
I actually, as I got to the end of it, I wanted to be a professional hockey player. But as I was getting to the end of that career, I really wanted to be a teacher and a coach.
Now you're coaching.
I've been coaching my whole life. I mean, it's been the greatest honor. And yeah, you're right. The whips job is probably the greatest coaching job I've ever been entrusted with.
Explain that to folks who don't know, because if you're not in politics, if you don't know how the House operates, what does a whip do?
Well, your listeners are going to be very familiar with the great St. Louis Blues Stanley Cup champions just a couple years ago, which we just awarded that again the other night. So you get teams. That's the sport I grew up with, and that's the sport I coach primarily. You are only as good as the weakest link on your bench. You need to make sure that everyone has their strengths magnified and their weaknesses minimized, right? You put everybody in the right situation to succeed, to get the success that through their hard work they're capable of achieving. And by the way, you also get them to believe that they can do some things that they have no business doing. You get them excited about a program and how they're going to make it work and how they're going to be integral to its success. And this job, that's why I told you when I started, there's only 2 rules for us. First rule, you take care of your people at home. Nobody in Washington, D.C. voted for you. Second rule, you take care of yourself. If you can take care of the people at home and yourself, now we can talk about being part of a team and what it is you need to accomplish for your people back at home and for the country at large. And it's frankly been an incredibly rewarding experience because of people like you, Mark.
Well, thank you. But when you see what we've done or not done in this 118th Congress, we have passed some major legislation, H.R. 2, the Secure Border Act, which we passed more than a year ago, and it's been sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk since May of last year. The Democrats refused to secure the border. That's got to be awfully, I know it's frustrating for me, but is it frustrating for you, and how so?
Well, it is frustrating for me, but I'm going to go to one other place first with that same discussion. You are the communication professional. I'm just a guy who tries to do it once in a while, and I will tell you that nobody in the country knows what H.R. 2 is. And it's one of my frustrations with our body. It's not just what Chuck Schumer's doing over there, but it's what we are not communicating. Our border security bill that you and I passed more than a year ago now, that sits over on Chuck Schumer's desk, essentially did 5 things. Finish the wall, reform parole, which is the president's ability to determine how many come in from where every year, reform the broken asylum system, end catch and release, and restore remain in Mexico. Not one of those, Mark, when you talk to Americans of all political persuasions, not one of those things seems radical. What did the Senate do? This is what we don't talk about enough. The Senate did not address any of those except perhaps one, and that was codifying what Secretary Mayorkas is currently doing on the southern border. When they said you're not going to have shutdown authority until 5,000 plus one are coming across your southern border, you and I would argue one is too many if you got them coming across illegally. They were going to put into law that you can do that, and frankly, that's why Mayorkas got impeached, because our law says when you cross our border illegally, we detain you, and then we adjudicate. And once we adjudicate, then we determine whether we send you back or if you have a legitimate purpose for trying to pursue residency in our country. He's not doing that. He detains them, maybe, some of them, and then just releases them into the country. So many now, we don't even know where 40% of them are. So I think we got to focus a lot on talking about that, because all Americans agree with us, but all reasonable Americans.
The Democrats and the woke broke media will say, and I just debated the rule for the appropriation bills today against Nagasi from Colorado on this very issue. And they come back and say, hey, well, you didn't take up the Senate so-called bipartisan bill to do something about it, so you're not serious. This bipartisan bill, so-called bipartisan, 2 senators does not make it bipartisan, as you said, will allow up to 5,000 illegal aliens a day. How about 0? We want to secure the border. How do we get our message out that we actually want to do something? Because this administration, this president is lying and gaslighting, deceiving the American people.
Well, the good news is you and I are in the heart of this, so we have to be messaging so that people understand what really is going on, because the media is... Our media today is not our media of my father and my grandfather. It is a partisan, agenda-driven media, right? You and I, we just have to keep fighting upstream. But here's the good news. Americans are a lot smarter than Joe Biden and his elite political cronies give them credit for. You're from the heart of the United States. I'm from Minnesota, just a little bit north of you. Remember, everything flows downstream. But then both of us are above Louisiana, so we're doing pretty good. But you're from the heart of the country, the heart and soul of the country. And you know that when you talk to your people, they recognize this garbage. They get it.
They know that our fellow citizens are dying from fentanyl poisoning. 107,000, an equivalent of a plane load of Americans dying a day, crashing. And yet this president, just until now, this election season, they're going to call it a crisis and do some window dressing. We see killings and rapes and tortures of...
And this guy won't even talk about it.
No. But back to the whip position. The whip tries to shape votes in that you're accounting for how people are going to vote on a particular bill. And then how do you go about getting people on board with voting a certain way, or do you do that?
Yeah, but in a different way. I don't tell you to do something that doesn't agree with your values. I would never do that, because I'm not going to do something that doesn't agree with mine, right? You represent the people at home, not Washington, D.C. So we first have to honor that. We have to recognize that when we work with any member, like even yourself, 2 things. 1, our communications are entirely private. We don't leak anything out of this office. There have been times in the past where somebody might talk to a member of leadership and say, you know, I really can't do this. They walk out of the office, and the next thing you know is one of these campus newspapers here has an unidentified source has identified so-and-so as being the problem, right? We don't do that because we need people to trust us when we are taking their information and then returning information that helps them make their decision. Let me back up just a little bit. Speaker sets the agenda. He's the policy guy. The majority leader basically sets a annual calendar and schedules the floor with different committees when stuff is ready to come to the floor. Our job is to count the votes. So to your question, what happens is this is coming to the floor like appropriation season right now. Last night we whipped 3 appropriations bills. Our job, once we have those, you typically get people who are undecided. Those are the ones that we clean up. They're usually amenable to supporting the bill. They just need more information. Then you have your lean no's, and what you need to do is identify why. You know, and that's the private part, right? You can't...
And how do we get you to yes?
Well, I don't go that route, because I think, to me, that's a little disrespectful. I do it this way. is there any way you can get to yes?
Gotcha.
Right? Rather than how do I get that?
Right.
I'm not.
You're not selling cars.
Yeah, Mark Alford's going to make his own decision, right? Tom Emmer's not going to make it for him. So I put it on you, Mark. I say, Mark, what would you need to support this thing?
Well, I'll tell you what. I was impressed when I first got here that you and then Speaker Kevin McCarthy both said, when you make a vote, let us know how you're going to vote. Don't change that, but vote for your conscience and vote for your district. Those two things.
That's right.
And we can work with that. Hey, we're talking with the whip, Tom Emmer, Majority Whip. Great guy. We are in his office here in Washington, D.C. Stay with us for Mark Alford's America. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tom's experience in radio starting out, and also blockchain and where are we going as a nation when it deals with cryptocurrency. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Mark Alford's America, where we give you a behind-the-scenes look at Washington and let you meet some of the fantastic people we're working with to help shape our great nation. We're talking with a Majority Whip, Tom Emmer. Tell me about your radio days. You had a slight gig in radio.
Well, you were talking about my legislative experience in Minnesota. I actually served from elected in 2004, sworn in January of 2005, and served through 2010. In the 2009-2010 part of my experience, I tried to get out of politics by running for governor. My wife, it's a true story, my wife literally said, why don't you run? Because we were being encouraged to run. She said, what's the worst that can happen? You'll definitely raise the intensity of the discussion, and then after 5 or 6 weeks, you'll fall flat on your face, and we can get back to raising the family and running the business. And a funny thing happened over the next year and a half. It was one of the most amazing experiences. Not only was I probably 7th on a depth chart of 9 when it started, I was endorsed on the second ballot, and then went off on a journey that I was outspent roughly $30 million to $6 total. It was one of the only races in the country, gubernatorial races, that actually went into a recount because it was less than 0.5%. It ultimately was roughly 8,100 ballots out of 2.1 million. And lasted a month. It's like, all right. I finally pulled the plug. I think it was December 7th of 2010. I said that was enough, and that's a whole story unto itself. But after that happened, what I found out is when you run as a conservative in the state of Minnesota, the other side doesn't just want to beat you. They don't want you staying in Minnesota. They want you to leave. It was very interesting. I was going around, didn't know that I wanted to practice law again. I had opportunities in different companies, and the response was always, yeah, but I'd love to hire you, but you're just a little too hot right now. You know, it's like, okay, great. Then I get a call to do a Friday morning legislative update at a local talk radio station. Happens to be the same one that Jesse Ventura was on, right? Only it had moved to the FM signal, so its reach was one of the biggest in the Midwest. I didn't realize it, but I was doing those Friday mornings. Then they let a guy go who I still like. I think he's in Nebraska, but they had a disagreement about a contract. They brought in he said he was a libertarian. He's an anarchist. His name's Bob Davis. Became a very good friend. But they brought in Bob, and they asked me to do these shows with Bob this first week. I didn't know they were doing test markets. And when they did the test markets, it just shot off the charts. I told you, you know this better than I, but if I remember right, a strong share in a marketplace like the Twin Cities is going to be 4 or 5.
Yeah.
We were hitting 11 plus, and after the Romney experience, when most conservative TV and talk radio drops off a little bit before it comes back, ours just kept going up. I had a brand new contract sitting on my desk in the spring of 2013, I think it was, because I was elected in 14 and sworn in 15. New contract sitting on my desk when my predecessor and my friend Michelle Bachmann announced that she was not going to seek another term, and my phone started ringing off the hook. And the next thing I knew, the radio, which, you know, $30 million of stuff against you, it leaves a mark, right? But the radio allowed me to reach a huge audience over that year and a half plus. It was 100.3 FM, which, I mean, it was the strongest signal in the northern Midwest. I got to reintroduce myself as who I am, not who they were told I was, right? And that probably made all the difference, even though the district that I ran in, I'll go back. It's we don't usually talk about it, but in the 2010 race, if you took out just the city limits of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the counties, not the counties, just the city limits, which back then was about 750,000 people, probably 500,000 voters. If you just took that out of the 2010 race, I won the rest of the state by six points. And this district was one that I did extremely well in, is the one I live in. And with Michelle leaving, it just seemed a natural fit. But now you brought me full circle to, I never expected to be here. It just kind of, things in life happened and put me in a place where it's like, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. And when I got here, I figured out why.
That happened last fall as well. When Kevin McCarthy basically got fired, the motion to vacate was enacted by Matt Gaetz. There were enough votes to vacate the chair. There was an opening for Speaker of the House, and you decided to step forward.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
I did not. I was being asked to do it right from the very in fact, before Kevin was vacated, I was asked to do it. One of the reasons Kevin McCarthy and I had such a great relationship is because I did not want anything that he wanted. He wanted to be the speaker. I used to tell him, I think you're crazy. It's the worst job in America, but you want it. And you know what? If you want it, I want to help you get it so that I can do the things that I came here to do, which you and I are going to get the opportunity to very soon. Take care of the debt, take care of the spending, and put this country back on track for success, right? And but Kevin, when that all fell apart and I was being encouraged to do it, you might remember I went to Scalise and said, Steve, is this something you want? Absolutely. I support you. I'm going to help you. That didn't work out.
Right.
Jim Jordan called me right after that. I think Jim thought I might want to run. And I said, Jim, if you're crazy enough to want that job, I'm all in. It was only after those two were denied that position that I thought, you know, I must be the only one. I have built an organization. This job, as Mike Johnson will tell you right now, this job is bigger than any corporation in the world. This thing is a huge undertaking, and I give him a lot of credit. It took him a little while to get his feet underneath him, but he really has done a good job of getting to where he needs to be. But for me, you might remember, I did something nobody else did. I said, thank you very much. I appreciate your confidence. I now move to suspend the rules, and I want a roll call vote in this room. And any one of you that has a problem with me, I want you at the mic, and I want you to tell me. And obviously, when you're dealing with 222 people, you're going to have people who have a disagreement. I felt, it was really interesting. I felt that as we were having those discussions, then you might remember everybody adjourned, and I met with a very small group, and I felt like we probably would have been very close. But I had said when it all started, we have embarrassed ourselves for the last 3 weeks. It ends today. And then, of course, President Trump decided that he wanted to go a different direction, which that's his business, and he and I are good, so he knows that. But I just decided, which I don't think you expected and nobody else did, I decided that when everybody came back, and you might remember the buzz in the room, everybody's ready for another knockdown, drag-out fight, and I walked up to the mic and I said, you know, great discussions. We got to keep doing this because we got to elect a new speaker, and it ain't going to be me. I'm going to continue to be the team guy. I'm going to continue to raise money and support all of you in what you're trying to do. But this ends today because we have embarrassed ourselves for the last 3 weeks. And you might remember, Mark, I walked out the back door. I'm told by some of the more senior members that that was the moment that they all sat back and went, oh, shit, now what do we do? And it took a few hours, but they ultimately settled on Mike Johnson. And, you know, that's the dumbest thing I think we ever did as a conference. The good news is this team is working again, and it's moving forward, and we're going to be extremely successful in November.
Real quick, what's your prediction for the presidential election in November?
Donald Trump, it's over. I mean, what you're going to see tomorrow night with the debate, you're going to see Donald Trump wipe the floor with Joe Biden. He just needs to let Joe Biden talk. America will see what they already suspect, right? Because you're finally going to have them there. And I expect CNN to play some media games as to how they portray it. You know, it's kind of like real estate. It's not the picture you take, it's how you take the picture, right? We'll see what they do with that. But then as we go forward, I think what you're going to see is they're going to try to replace Joe Biden. I don't think it's going to work, but they're going to try to replace Joe Biden because they are scared to death that what is happening will happen. And I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
Well, with Emmer, we're going to have to do a part 2 on this because we're out of time. We'll talk about crypto next time.
I'd love it.
Thanks for joining us for Mark Alford's America. We'll talk again next week. Until then, remember, I believe in you. I believe that our best days are still ahead of us. And Tom Emmer, I believe in America.
God bless you, Mark Alford.